Time now to get you an important voice, time to get you an inside view on the GST implementation. Joining us is none other than Bibek Debroy, member of NITI Aayog, to talk about the biggest tax reform which has kicked in and how India is adapting to that change. Thanks very much, Dr. Debroy, for joining us with your perspective. The government is stuck to the GST rollout deadline. However, many traders are yet to align themselves. How do you see the transition, and in the meantime, what kind of productivity loss do you estimate there to be?
I think there are a lot of people who simply did not believe that the deadline would be adhered to. Although there have been deadlines in the past, there's been a deadline in 2010, there's been a deadline in 2012. There was sufficient notice, if notice is the word to use, and there were sufficient consultations. So I think people who are saying that they are unprepared, they have not been consulted, they are being somewhat unfair. Obviously, if there's going to be a change, there will be some amount of adjustment that is necessary, some issues of transition, rules will be changed, tweaked. So far as the productivity question is concerned, it's impossible to estimate that.
Dr. Debroy, afternoon. Thanks for joining in. Now, do you think that perhaps in the short term there's going to be a blip in consumption due to the confusion on prices of commodities, because there still isn't too much clarity there?
I understand that cigarette prices have come down, of all things. So people will presumably smoke more. I'm using that trivial example to illustrate that this apprehension that people will consume less, I don't see any reason for that.
Now, Dr. Debroy, Q4 of last year saw a dip in growth due to demonetization. In the next couple of quarters, what kind of an impact do you think GST will have on growth?
You use the word due to demonetization. As you should be aware, it is difficult to control for many things. What this was due to, we don't really know. And I also want to flag that had it been due to demonetization, you would have seen an effect in the nominal growth rate. The nominal growth rate shows no sharp dip. It is the real which is obtained by deflating the nominal with the deflator. So if I'm going to buy that argument of due to demonetization, then you will have to show me it's happened in the nominal also. Otherwise, you will have to explain to me why demonetization should lead to a change in the deflator.
Right. GST was supposed to add about 1.5 to 2% to India's GDP. Where do you see that number settling now?
What many people don't seem to realize, because they cannot be bothered to check that, is that this was an estimate made for the ideal GST. We have only begun the process of moving towards that ideal GST.
While the government is quick to allay concerns and also perhaps create mechanisms to keep prices in control, how do you see the effect of GST on inflation?
Why should GST have any impact on inflation? If the government has already allayed the fears, asking the question means that you have some fresh fears. So tell me what those fresh fears are.
So now, do you believe that the inflationary pressures due to GST are likely to reduce the elbow room for monetary policy easing as well?
The monetary policy is a completely separate issue. You have presumed that it's going to have some effect on inflation.
Okay, understood. Now, the government says that old inventory can be sold with new GST price tags. But do you think that's a bit unfair to outlets that have already sold stuff at steep discounts in order to clear their inventory?
I wouldn't use the word unfair. Obviously, there are problems, there are transition problems, and if one comes across with a problem, it is reasonable on the part of the government to adjust the rules. Had the government not listened, you would have come and said that, isn't it unfair not to listen to this? So the government gets it both ways.
How long do you expect the GST pain to last?
It depends on the definition of the pain. There are some rules which will need to be clarified, tweaked. That should not take more than about, I would guess, 3 months or so.
While the government was conservative in their budgeted non-tax revenue collection, how do you see GST affecting the fiscal calculations, especially the growth in tax collections, particularly in, that ratio of tax to GDP going up?
The union government has guaranteed that it will compensate the states for any revenue losses, but I would say it's too early to judge that.